What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to a Thanksgiving edition of the Inside Canes Recruiting Podcast. I'm Luke Chaney, joined as always by Stephen Wagner. Stephen, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. I got a little turkey here. We've got 24 hours left until Thanksgiving. Less than that now. Season's almost over. Signing day is exactly 1 week away as we're taping this. Man, like the moment really is almost upon us. I'm ready to get this thing over with, man. It's been a very, very long calendar year, but now the finish line really is in sight, and we're starting to get an idea of exactly what Miami's going to finish with in this class, and we got a lot to talk about today.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have a good idea of what this class is going to look like, but there are still a few players who are still absolutely worth talking about who could potentially join this class in the next few days. Before we get into the show, I first want to mention that it is presented to you by Caneswear, your ultimate destination for all your Miami Hurricanes needs, especially as we venture into the holiday season. Black Friday's coming up, Cyber Monday's coming up. Caneswear, has a ton of deals for you for all your holiday Hurricanes needs. Get that special someone in your life some new Hurricanes gear with Caneswear. So the first player who I wanted to talk to you about today, Stephen, a guy that we've talked extensively about over these last 2 months, someone who has come down to Miami to watch the Hurricanes play, and that's Alabama defensive line commit Nolan Wilson, one of the top defensive linemen in the country, a player that Miami really, really covets in the 26th class. Where do you think the Hurricanes stand right now when it comes to Nolan Wilson?
Yeah, so Wilson has obviously been one of these really, really big, prominent defensive line commits that Miami or defensive line names that Miami's been working on for quite a while now. He really rose on their board during the spring. They shot their shot pretty aggressively with him, got him down for an official visit. And at one point, it felt like it was kind of 50-50 between Miami and Alabama. He got down for the Florida game earlier this fall, and it definitely seemed like Miami was going to have a chance. I'll put it like that. And of the defensive line targets that Miami's been trying to flip this fall, and of the 4-star like high-end blue chip defensive line targets that Miami's been trying to flip this fall, the Lamar Browns, the Bryce Perry Wrights, guys kind of in that category. I would say that Nolan Wilson kind of consistently felt like the name that Miami was going to have sort of the best chance with, but now that we're kind of coming down towards signing day, I'm not necessarily ultra confident that Miami's going to be able to pull this one off. I'm probably 75-25 that Wilson ends up sticking with Alabama. I think loyalty really means a lot and is valued for a guy like Nolan Wilson. I think that really, really matters to him. I know he has a lot of respect for Miami staff, but I think the fact that he's been locked in with Alabama for so long now has really factored into kind of the way he feels about his pledge to the Tide, and I think that he's the type of person who doesn't really want to feel like he's cheating on the team that he's been committed to. I remembered hearing that earlier in the fall, whenever Miami was flipping Gavin Mueller's, the Mueller family kind of felt like they were cheating on Colorado a little bit. I think Nolan Wilson doesn't really want to feel like he's cheating on Alabama just because they've shown so much loyalty to him, and he obviously values that. Quite a bit. Miami is going to remain pretty involved here over the next week or so, but I would expect a final decision to probably be made sometime around December 1st, December 2nd, maybe even November 30th. Somewhere in there, we will absolutely know where Nolan is going to end up going. But right now, I'm leaning very, very heavily toward Alabama. I think that Miami's probably fighting a little bit of an uphill battle right now. I did have someone tell me that they kind of felt like it was a little bit even closer to 50-50, but kind of after asking around a little bit more, I think I'm a little bit more confident in saying that it's more like 75-25 that he ends up sticking with the Tide.
or another longtime commit to another school who we might feel a little bit more confident about Miami's chances. Mari Latimer, running back who has been committed to Wisconsin since June, kind of fits the billing of that prototypical Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal type running back, big, can run it through the tackles and all that good stuff. Miami likes him a lot. Also, Tennessee and Ohio State are in the mix for Latimer. Stephen, where do you think Miami falls? I mean, like I said, Tennessee, Ohio State, some other very well-known programs are in the mix for Latimer. Just do you think Miami has a good shot to flip him?
Yeah, so last week, I did kind of call my shot on Amari Latimer and say that I think Miami's going to find a way to get this thing done. Right now, I'm actually not totally certain where he's going to end up. I wrote in an intel piece that we ran on the site Monday morning that, do I think Miami's going to end up flipping Amari Latimer? Well, maybe. I think that's a little bit more complex right now because, as one person told me, it's kind of an interesting time at the moment in Amari Latimer's recruitment because remember, Miami was really all in on him back in the spring and last fall. Then things pretty much just kind of died away during the summer, during the early fall. And then Miami really, really turned the heat up in a really big way late in the fall. He committed to Wisconsin. Stock continued to rise. Wisconsin's been very, very loyal to him. I do think that he really values Luke Fickell as a head coach. His older brother also plays for Wisconsin, and the Badgers really have done a really good job keeping him locked in and doing whatever they feel like they need to do to make sure that he stays committed to them because they know just how good he actually is. Tennessee has also been in the mix. Ohio State, not really a school that we're monitoring as much anymore now that they've added Legend Bay, the running back from Forney, Texas. So that's not really a program that we're going to have our eyes on quite as much anymore. I know they lead in the RPM, or in the recruiting prediction machine, but I would anticipate that some picks will probably come in at some point in favor of another school, or heck, possibly even favoring him to end up sticking with Wisconsin. Last week, I felt like it was probably pretty unlikely that he ended up sticking with the Badgers. Now I'm starting to think that there probably could be a very real chance that he ends up sticking with them through all of this. There's definitely a non-zero chance that he sticks with Wisconsin. Tennessee is very definitely a team that we're keeping an eye on. Miami's a team that we're keeping an eye on. So the question of, do I think Miami's going to land Amari Latimer? Well, right now, all I can really give you is maybe. This is definitely kind of one of those fog of war moments where it kind of feels like this thing could go any number of different directions. But the three teams that we're looking at right now are pretty much Wisconsin, Tennessee, and Miami. I absolutely see worlds where he ends up at any of those programs. He does have pretty strong ties to the university. Some of our old heads out there, our old listeners, or maybe just even Miami football historians might remember Don Latimer. He was a really, really talented and productive defensive lineman in the pre-Schnellenberger days. In fact, I think he was a defensive lineman the year before, or the 4 years before Schnellenberger arrived at Miami. He's in the Miami Athletics Hall of Fame. That's his great uncle. Amari is his great nephew. He still has a lot of family in the Miami area, and he does have family that wants him to be at Miami because they're really big Canes fans. But I don't think that that's ultimately what this is going to end up boiling down to. I do think that Miami probably would be a really, really good fit for him, just in terms of kind of the style of game that Miami plays and the style of player that he is. But again, not sleeping on the Badgers and not really sleeping on the Volunteers either. Like I said, we're kind of in the fog of war right now as far as that recruitment goes.
So it seems like we are in the midst of a three-team race between Tennessee, Wisconsin, and Miami, and we will absolutely get some clarity on that in the next few days. Now, before we get into the rest of the show, let's take a moment and hear from our friends at CaneSport's.
Welcome to CaneSport's. New store, new items, same great experience. Family owned and operated since 2010, CaneSport's has the latest merchandise from the Miami Hurricanes, Miami Dolphins, Florida Panthers, Inter Miami CF, and more. Come visit us at our store in Davie on University Drive, just south of 595, or online at caneswear.com. CaneSport's, the spot Miami fans shop.
And another player that we've talked a lot about in recent months, who at one point we really like Miami's chances with, is Blake Stewart, former Clemson safety commit, and a player that we talked about was, hey, Miami's in a good spot. Vanderbilt's also, pushing as well. But Georgia has made a really, really impressive run in Stewart over these last couple of weeks. Just reading the tea leaves, it seems like the Bulldogs are in a pretty good position for Stewart. Steven, is that kind of what you're picking up as well?
Yeah, at one point, I felt like Miami was the full-blown favorite for Blake Stewart, and I was even telling our subscribers that I thought he was going to end up in the class. I included him in mock classes. I was saying, hey, really like Miami's position. We think it's probably going to come down to Miami and Vanderbilt, and we really, really felt like Miami was going to find a way to get it done. Now he's visited Georgia in back-to-back weeks. He was in Athens for the Georgia-Texas game, and then he returned to Athens this past weekend whenever the Bulldogs played. I think it was Charlotte or someone like that. What I do understand is whenever he left Georgia, he did not leave Georgia giving Georgia the I'm 100% committed. He did not formally inform the staff that he had committed to Georgia or that he was going to commit to Georgia while he was on that visit. However, the buzz that I've gotten so far is that Georgia really likes their position. There's a lot of confidence in Georgia circles. Miami is still going to be involved. They're going to keep swinging away because, man, they really have viewed this player as like a 5-star level athlete. And he really is a really, really talented player who checks, just so many freaking boxes. He's been a massive priority for Miami. Really going back to the spring, they loved his junior season tape. They love his senior season tape too. They think he is a really, really good player and kind of one of those guys that they view as sort of like a must get for them in this class. But right now I'm leaning very heavily toward the Bulldogs. I no longer feel like it's a given that he'll end up at Miami. If you want to ask me, what I think the chances are of him landing at Georgia versus landing at Miami, I'd probably say it's like 80-20 that he ends up sticking with the Bulldogs. Now, that being said, I would probably argue that Miami has pushed harder for longer than anyone else. And Mario Cristobal is always going to give himself a chance. The Hurricanes are going to stay involved here over the next week. They are going to make an all-out push, and I think that they will give him a lot to think about. They are not going to make it easy. They're not going to give up. But right now, I think it's kind of hard to ignore the momentum that Georgia really has. And just kind of touching on safety recruiting real quick. If Miami doesn't end up landing Blake Stewart, I would anticipate that they're probably done at the safety position. Possible they end up putting some feelers out, but they've got two safeties that they feel really, really good about in Cortez Redding and J.J. Dunnigan. They love both of those guys. They think Redding is going to be a little bit of a sleeper that surprises some people. Dunnigan, whenever the opportunity struck for Miami to be able to get him in the class, they jumped on it right away. They've got both of those guys fully locked up. So if they don't end up getting Stewart, I would anticipate that we're probably going to be done at the defensive back position.
And another player that we are also monitoring, a player that Corey Heatherman really is really a big fan of, and that is linebacker or former Louisville commit and St. Xavier linebacker Carson Bush, 6'2", 220 linebacker. Fresh off a Wisconsin official visit, I should mention, so the Badgers are in the mix as well. Is this a player that you think Miami stands a decent chance with heading into signing day?
Yeah, this is a little bit more of a complex, or this question has a little bit more of a complex answer because I can confirm that there definitely is a little bit of interest from both sides. The Hurricanes really, really valued Karsten Busch whenever they offered him. I think it was either like September 31st, or I'm sorry, September 30th, or maybe October 1st, back in the fall. They pushed really, really hard for him. They were never able to get him to campus. He was committed to Louisville the entire time. It felt like the Hurricanes really lost any sort of momentum or any shot that they had whenever they lost to Louisville on the field. And keep in mind, this is a kid who had some pretty strong ties to the Louisville program. He lives in the city of Louisville. His high school head coach's son is the tight ends coach at Louisville, and both of his parents are Louisville season ticket holders. So it kind of felt like, man, Miami is going to be fighting a little bit of an uphill battle. Earlier this week, it really surprised me whenever I saw that Karsten Busch had decommitted from Louisville because, quite frankly, I just kind of assumed he was probably going to end up sticking and signing with the Cardinals. Wisconsin immediately received a couple of predictions for Busch in the recruiting prediction machine, and it seemed probably pretty likely that he was going to end up heading to Wisconsin. But there definitely is a little bit of interest from both sides on Karsten Busch. But I think that we're kind of at a weird point in the cycle where Miami had a lot of interest and they pushed really hard for him and they came up short, and it kind of seemed like they kind of understood, okay, we're probably not going to get this kid. That ship has sailed. Let's move on. And now a window has sort of, reopened partially a little bit. Miami's chances are no longer zero, but I don't know if I would go so far as to say that I anticipate him being a member of this class right now. I mean, really all we can do is monitor the situation, because while there definitely is interest from both sides, it's kind of difficult right now to tell exactly what the extent of that interest is, just because of how odd the timing is right now. Miami's basically being asked to completely restart a push that had, we felt like had more or less died out kind of in October. He's never visited campus. Corey Heatherman did have the opportunity to get up to a school and watch him play during one of the Hurricanes' bye weeks. And, they were pretty involved for a while. But, man, it really does feel like this is going to be kind of a complex situation. All I can say right now is he's a name that we're going to monitor. I wouldn't firmly say that, he's going to do one thing or the other, or it's going to play out one way or the other. But all we can really do right now is kind of keep tabs on what's going on.
Absolutely. And looking at Miami's current class, a name that North Carolina, which is a familiar school for Miami in this recruiting class, of course, is as they flip Kent Dobson from the Hurricanes 26 class. Javian Mallory is a name that UNC has been making a pretty big push for as of late. Javian Mallory, of course, the running back from West Boca, who has been committed to Miami, if I'm not wrong, since March. Longtime Hurricanes commit, has been saying all the right things about Miami, has basically shut down his recruitment with Miami for a long time. Steven, is there a chance, or is there a decent chance that UNC has a shot at flipping Mallory in these days leading up to signing day?
I think it's really unlikely, and North Carolina definitely is making the level of effort that they would need to make if they were going to have a chance to flip someone like Mallory. But right now, I think it's the odds are really overwhelming that he's going to end up sticking with the Hurricanes. I think North Carolina faces a really stiff uphill battle. Mallory wants to be at Miami. He likes it down here. He's got a great relationship with Matt Merritt and Mario Cristobal. He feels great about his decision. I do not anticipate that he ends up going anywhere. But we'll kind of keep an eye on North Carolina, just because, Bill Belichick has been able to pull off some stuff this cycle that's been a little bit surprising. So we'll continue to kind of monitor it, but we are not that worried about Miami potentially losing Javian Mallory at this point.
Yeah, from my conversations with Javian Mallory, and I'm sure from yours, I mean, he has loved Miami. His head coach at West Boca, Dylan Potts, has reaffirmed Mallory's commitment as well to Miami, just saying how well of a job uh, the Hurricane staff has done in his recruitment, and that's kind of the direction that we expect it to take. And lastly, Stephen, is there any potential, or is there any potential you see of any other players in Miami's 30 prospect class flipping late to another school in these last few days?
Right now, the only player that we're actively anticipating will not be in Miami's class is Anthony Kennedy. We've reported that a couple of different times. Right now, I think he probably ends up at either Missouri or Arkansas. I know Ryan Silverfield over at Memphis has some interest in him too. I haven't put a pick on him to any specific school because I'm not 100% which school he'll end up ultimately flipping to, but I would not anticipate that he ends up being a member of Miami's class. Other than that, it seems like Miami's really locked in with every other member, with every other member of this class. Ashari Charles has received a little bit of a push from Missouri, but I would not anticipate that he ends up going anywhere. He's still pretty solid with the Hurricanes. Logan Nagel is still receiving some contact from Pittsburgh, but again, one of those situations I do not anticipate that he'll end up going anywhere. And there are going to be a few other kids who I'm sure will have contact with other schools here over the next week or so. But from everything that we've been able to gather, it does not seem like Miami is going to lose anyone else outside of Kennedy.
That is very encouraging news as we head into signing day. That Miami will be retaining a very large majority of this 30-player class. And that will do it for this Thanksgiving edition episode of the Inside Canes Recruiting Podcast. We want to wish you and your family a very happy and a very safe Thanksgiving on Thursday. And for Stephen Wagner, I'm Luke Chaney. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time. Make sure if there's anything that we missed to keep it locked into the Recruiting Storm Center message board on CaneSport.com to ask us any questions you might have about Miami's recruiting efforts heading into signing day, which is on Wednesday, December 3rd. So right around the corner. Anyways, we will see you next time. Happy Thanksgiving.